All right, look, this is 85 slides and it's got a 6-minute video. So I'll speak fast. All right, we're going to talk about the same thing I talked about last time. Who wasn't here last time? I know you weren't, Soretti. Okay, that's why I'm going to repeat exactly what I did last time. Really. The lights. Hey, lights. Okay, this is a really nice place to start. Jenny's distracting everything, but this is a good place to start. Separation of church and state. I mean, golly, that's like the motto of the liberals. Where is she? She's going to miss my Hillary Clinton dig. All right. But what people don't realize when they say separation of church and state, that's really an acknowledgement that there is a supernatural. At least there's some people who believe in a supernatural. That's what church implies. So that we can look at reality as being the combination of supernatural and physical. And in a lot of people's lives, this is how they view reality. Now, this requires that we make some decisions about how we look at reality. The physical is pretty straightforward. We can look at reality, the physical part, math, physics, chemistry, biology, philosophy, and so on. The supernatural, it becomes a little bit more cloudy. We have atheism, which is a supernatural view, Church of Satan, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and all the way down the list. What you can gather from that list of the supernatural is that not everyone has the same belief system. Like I said, the physical is easy. Okay, the physical is easy. Supernatural starts getting into beliefs and fuzzy things like that. And it's the truth claims which distinguish the various belief systems. And that there are contradictory truth claims. For example, atheism and Christianity, clearly contradictory truth claims. Therefore, not all belief systems can be true. Now, I'm talking today about a theistic worldview. Last time I did the naturalism worldview. This time I'm doing a theistic worldview. And so, in a theistic worldview, truth is something that is revealed by God. It's not constructed or invented by individuals or communities. Objective truth exists and is knowable. God is the source of objective truth about himself and about his creation. It's absolute, it's not relative, changing, or revisable. It's universal, it applies everywhere, it engages everything and excludes nothing. And it's specific. What is true excludes everything that's not true. Okay? So again, this is a theistic worldview, like I said. For those of you who weren't here last week, we spent a whole hour talking about naturalism worldview. Now, over the years, now I'm a Christian, so obviously I'm going to present a Christian worldview of sorts, okay? I'll try not to taint it too much, but that's probably a lie too. But over the years, there's been a steady eroding of theistic truth. The Puritans, when they came over here way back, they were highly educated. They were the ones that started all the major universities. Okay? But then came along something called the Great Awakenings. Between 1720 and 1860, the stress there was immediate personal conversion instead of study, reflection, and commitment. So all of a sudden, religion became a personal, emotional thing. And that's strange coming from a Pentecostal such as me. But it got rid of all the intellectual part of Christianity. Then came naturalism, which we spent all hour last week talking about. And the naturalism defined knowledge as science, things like that. And then there was something called German higher criticism, which isn't that important. But what that did is it sought to question the historical validity of the Bible. And finally, today, for most people, Bible is nothing more than a practical guide for ethics and spiritual growth. So over time, we've seen this eroding of the intellectual side of theism. To where now we have two lives that we live, basically. We have a private life where we have our personal beliefs. Okay? And then we have a public life, where our public life is everything scientific, physical, the physical world. And if I really want to expand this, okay, now today the view of theism is it's non-rational, non-cognitive, non-factual, nothing but personal beliefs, those things that are true for you, but not true for me. Naturalism, we talked about it last week, rational, verifiable, true for everyone. And this is the big divide that we see nowadays in society. And it spills over, this spills over into all of society, and I just picked the Supreme Court as an example. These are 4 opinions rendered by the United States Supreme Court. I'm not going to go through these, but I'm going to read the yellow stuff, and on the next slide I've summarized it. Men cannot be put to the proof of their religious beliefs. The place of religion in our society is the home, the church, and the sacred citadel of the individual heart and mind. Ecclesiastical decisions are accepted as matters of faith, whether or not rational or measurable by objective criteria. And religion is where knowledge leaves off and faith begins. Okay, so I've summarized this here, and I want to reiterate what I just said. Religious belief is to be confined to the church, the home, and the individual's heart. So you see this divide between private and public life. Religious belief is not rational, it cannot be proved, and is where knowledge leaves off and faith begins. Where knowledge leaves off and faith begins. That is the mindset, really, across the country of what religious belief is. And I have a 6-minute video at the end that kind of goes through this. Okay. But that mindset shows a misunderstanding or a confusion of knowledge and faith. Because we all have knowledge and we all exhibit faith. Knowledge, facts and information acquired through experience or education, and faith is a belief that something is true based on knowledge. So you can't separate faith and knowledge. You can't do it. Because faith is true based on knowledge. Knowledge, there's different kinds. Faith in different things. Naturalism, we have faith in the natural laws. Theism, we have faith in the things pertaining to God. Okay. Knowledge has many sources. Okay, knowledge has many sources. Knowledge is truth and facts pertaining to a particular subject matter. And here are the various sources: education, historical fact, personal experiences, the power of reason, and things that we know to be true in life. I mean, just common sense stuff. Now I'm going to illustrate this with evolution. Knowledge, truth and facts pertaining to the origin of the species. Now I showed you a whole bunch of sources of knowledge, and the one that I just picked here is the power of reason. Mutation-induced genetic variation, we know that is true. There's adaptation due to, as a result of microevolution, like these little finch beaks and all that stuff that you've probably read about somewhere. Divergence of species on the tree of life, that's kind of cute. I put that up there. And then fossil remains. And Darwin, he wasn't really the first to propose evolution, but he was the one that got the most publicity for it. But with his power of reason, having this information, except he didn't know anything about mutations, but he was able to put together a theory of evolution and come to the conclusion that humans evolved from somewhere down at the bottom of the tree. Delham, did you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. I just want to make sure you've moved from the bottom of that tree. All right. Christianity. Christianity, knowledge here of the truth and facts pertaining to the things of God. Here's the source of knowledge. I use historical facts. These are 4 facts that even the most severe critic of Christianity does not argue with. Once Jesus was taken from the cross, he was buried in a tomb. The tomb was found empty by women. Multiple appearances of Jesus are recorded. And the disciples believed Jesus, even though they were predisposed, that Jesus had arisen, even though they were predisposed not to believe that. But like I said, these are 4 historical facts that even the most ardent critics of Christianity do not deny. Okay, Faith and knowledge are intimately linked. Faith, a belief that something is true based on knowledge. I just want to emphasize this because, like I said, I have a 6-minute video at the end where they kind of get confused with this. True faith does not exist without knowledge. Otherwise, it becomes blind faith. Where's Briette when I need her? All right. Example of blind faith. Hillary Clinton was interviewed February 16, 2000. I don't believe I've ever lied. Okay? Knowledge. What we're seeking is truth and facts pertaining to Hillary Clinton. The source, historical fact. Benghazi attack, September 11, 2012. Hillary Clinton sends Chelsea, her daughter, the very same day. Al-Qaeda-like group responsible for terrorist attacks. 3 days later, September 14th, Clinton blames an awful internet video as the coffins of the 4 guys arrive at the Air Force Base. Now, where are you? Okay, so believing that Hillary Clinton is honest and trustworthy, to me, is blind faith based on knowledge. Okay, very good. Moving right along. The controversy is always in knowledge. It's never in faith. The controversy that exists is always in knowledge. It's what people will accept as knowledge, as being true. That's where the controversy exists in virtually everything. Never faith. Okay, so this is my talk for the day. Subtract time for lunch and all that. A 10-minute introduction. And like I said, I'm going to try to give a theistic perspective on the fetus as a person. And it's helpful if you're trying to compare worldviews, which ultimately that's what I'm going to end up doing, comparing the 2 worldviews. You can look at various ways of doing this, but Nancy Percy wrote this in her book. It's easy to compare them in terms of creation, fall, and redemption. And since we're only interested in personhood, all we really need to worry about is creation or a theory of origins. How shall we view person? That's what I'm interested in today. So we need to concern ourselves only with creation, and there's only 2 choices for creation. Either humans were created, or they came about by evolution. Those are the only 2 choices, unless you can come up with a third. So creation is a theory of origins. Naturalism looks at evolution as their creation story. Theism looks at is God as their creation story. Now, I'm not here to change anybody's minds. I'm just here to convey information. The whole concept of personhood is deeply embedded into one's worldview. And if you go down to that line marked person, and I've made it simple, pro-choice and pro-life, people who are pro-choice, and I'm not here to criticize anybody, okay? I'm really not. I'm just here to present information. People who are pro-choice generally accept same-sex marriage, open borders, and big government. People who are pro-life generally recognize marriages between one man and one woman, and I'm not getting into that, residents, I'm not going to do it. They favor restricted immigration and fewer government regulations. My point is that whatever your choice, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, it's embedded in your worldview. And so it would be impossible for me to dislodge you from your worldview because I'd have to dislodge you on all these other things. And that's not my intent. So I recognize this, and you need to recognize this as I go through this presentation. Okay, evolution, and I put proof in quotation. I don't know why I just did. But the reason is we need to see what evolution says and whether it makes sense and so on and so on. So I'm going to prove evolution one way or another. The source that I'm going to use, education and Nevada put science, so that's the source I'm going to use in regards to talking about evolution. And this is some really basic stuff. Evolution is a process where you go from A to B, and this process is governed by 2 other processes, mutation. Mutations change the genetic text. Natural selection. Favorable mutations are passed on. Unfavorable mutations are weeded out. As a result the driving force for evolution is mutations. It's not natural selection, it's mutations. Natural selection acts on the mutations. Mutations are random, undirected, and without purpose. Natural selection acts on the mutation to allow for survival of the fittest. And in the end, all species in existence come about by exactly the same mechanisms. All right, here's my little schematic. DNA genes, just think of those as the same thing. They program for amino acids. The amino acids come together in proteins. Proteins orchestrate regulatory functions, and this is really what leads to evolution. So you have mutation, natural selection, evolution. But proteins are paramount in this picture, okay? And here's an example. Here's evolution from the protein word to the protein gene. The D in the protein word, that amino acid changes to the amino acid E. The amino acid W is mutated to the amino acid G to give the protein GOR. The amino acid R is mutated to amino acid N to give the protein GON. And the amino acid O is mutated to the amino acid E to give the protein gene. Okay, but here's another pathway. The amino acid D is mutated to the amino acid E to give WAR. The amino acid W is mutated to the amino acid K to give COR, but COR is non-functional. That's a non-functional protein. That word doesn't exist. So natural selection acts on that and eliminates it from the equation. So if we look at it in more general terms, the protein A mutated to the protein script A through a series of intermediate steps. And the question is, are these functional? And is there enough time for this to take place? This talk is like version 5. I've got 300 and something slides. I don't know. And there were like 4 slides for this, so I reduced them to this 1 slide. So you all have to thank me for this. All right. Functional. Are the intermediates functional? This guy named Douglas Axe, who was a chemical engineer. Now he does biochemistry stuff. But what he did is he did a series of mutations on beta-lactamase, and what he found was that very low probability that the intermediates in going from A to B, or A to whatever, script A, very low probability, 1 in 10 to the 77, that a single mutation will result in a functional protein. And probability 1 in 10 to the 77 is pretty low. Okay, so maybe not single mutations, but what about coordinated mutations? 2 mutations at one time. Behe and Durrett looked at this mathematically, did a simulation, 10 to the billion years to produce 2 coordinated mutations. 10 to the billion years is more than twice the age of the Earth. And for hominids, the species line, I guess, that we would be in, it took 216 million years to produce 2 functional coordinated mutations, and that's more than 30 times the amount of time available to produce humans and chimpanzees from some presumed common ancestor. So, we have a problem. What the data show is that there's a very low probability of functional intermediates when you're talking about mutations, and they're talking about proteins here. And there's not enough time even to carry out 2 coordinated mutations. So this seems to be a problem, but there's a bigger problem here. It's called the Cambrian explosion, and I'm going to get my little... Okay. Here, this is a number of phyla, and for the life of me, I didn't remember what a phyla is. So over here, phylum is stuck between kingdom and class. Everybody happy with that? I didn't have a clue. And this is a function of time, and what you see is about 500 million years ago, there was an abrupt increase in the number of phyla. Okay, and as a matter of fact, about the same number of phyla that exists today came into being 500 million years ago. But it came into being quickly and within a very short time period, less than 10 million years. And what came about at that time is this. This is the pre-Cambrian, before the Cambrian explosion. These are actually living organisms, and that's what they look like. With the Cambrian explosion, this is what came into existence, more complex organisms. This is a trilobite, and I didn't know it. I had to look it up, Google it, as my wife says. It has a complex eye, even the same kind of eye that insects have, allowing it to look around 3 dimensions, 360 degrees. So what happened in that less than a 10 million year time period was all of a sudden the appearance of very complex body plans. So this is the bigger problem for evolution. It's the appearance of complex body plans within a very, very short time period, less than 10 million years. So we have this problem here. I just picked a monkey. In going from here to here through a series of small incremental changes, which is what evolution proposes, new complex body plans from multiple coordinated mutations, there's just not enough time for this to happen. You can't do this in less than 10 million years. But there's there's a better solution. Better solution. Oh, Lordy. Okay, that's a cell. I mean, before it implants. I don't care what you want to call it. It's a cell before it implants. And within there is a control center. And this control center is responsible for the body plan. You have one in the monkey, and you have a control center in humans. You have a control center in all living organisms. And they're the ones, the control center is what guides the trajectory into a complex body plan. So, the simple solution is the mutations didn't occur through all these little tiny steps, but it was the mutations that took place in this control center. So all of a sudden you shift the trajectory, from here, from that body plan, mutation in the control center, and now it's shifted over to the human. So one giant mutation in this control center, that'll do the job, and that'll take care of the problem. Okay, well, the control center is complex. It consists of genes, regulatory networks, and epigenes. This was another 3-slide one that I reduced to this 1 slide. Okay, it's highly integrated, very tightly controlled. So much so that spontaneous mutations do not take place in the control center. Okay, and as a matter of fact, if you induce mutations in the control center, these are uniformly fatal. Mutations cannot generate the information necessary to build a body plan. Can't be done. And people have recognized problems with evolution for a long, long time. And I went back just 20 years. Scientists have been saying this now for 20, 30 years, that evolution is not working. Genetics might be adequate for explaining microevolution, but microevolution is not seen as being able to turn a reptile into a mammal or to convert a fish into an amphibian. The origin of the species, Darwin's problem, remains unsolved. A lot of questions with evolution. All right. Now, let's look at personhood. In a naturalism worldview, we did this last week, but now I'm going to look specifically at evolution, the mechanism thought to bring about human beings. Okay. Mutations drive evolution. It's random, undirected, and it has no purpose. It must follow, then, that anything brought about by a purposeless process would be evolution, that must necessarily exist without a purpose. So if we're saying humans came into being as a result of the process of evolution, evolution is a purposeless process, so humans were made with no purpose whatsoever. So there's no intrinsic worth to a human being, One's worth is determined by others. That's a consequence of evolution. So what sorts of things are they? I'm talking about human beings. Evolved through, okay. Humans came about through an impersonal, purposeless process. As accidentally formed, humans are accidentally formed, came about by chance. Man can have, and please, ladies, don't get offended, I use man. Consider me as old and over the hill and certainly not politically correct. Man can have no intrinsic worth, so human beings assume the worth then assigned to them by other human beings. Man does not answer to a divine moral being because man came about as a result of an amoral process. Therefore, man is free to create whatever version of morality he wishes. Man is centered on self because there's no divine theistic person, and he finds no meaning in life. How can he if he came about as a result of a purposeless process? Now, what I want to do is connect this to what we talked about last week. Evolution and personal, purposeless, non-moral process. Human beings are of no intrinsic worth. The value of human beings are assigned by others. Remember last week what we talked about personhood? A human being is a person if that human being exhibited thought, reason, self-awareness. These, and I showed you this last week, these are properties assigned by other people. Okay? And there was a consequence to this, and one of the consequences I talked about last week was infanticide. It's a direct consequence from this, okay? All right. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? Human beings are not privileged. Human beings are no different than non-human animals. That's a consequence of evolution because we all came about through the same process. There are no absolute moral truths. There can't be, because evolution is an amoral process, and it's survival of the fittest. Natural selection acts on the mutation. Only the fit survive. This has been used to eliminate inferior ethnic groups. I didn't know this, but Darwin opposed smallpox vaccinations and laws helping the poor. Makes sense. The poor were inferior and not able to survive, so survival of the fittest. Hitler attempted to eradicate the Jewish race. Margaret Sanger, I would say the father of Planned Parenthood, but it's a she, so the mother of Planned Parenthood, promoted abortion and infanticide and actually set up clinics in areas where she thought the people were inferior and they ought not to survive. Okay. All right, so that's a rehash of last week, but in a different view, a different set of words. All right, now I'm going to look at the theism worldview. Proof, in quotes, the same way I proved evolution. All right, so bear with me. What we're looking for here is truth and facts pertaining to the things of God. Like I said, there are multiple sources of information, and the one that I'm using here is the power of reason, in particular philosophy. And there's a lot of ways to approach this. And I just, rather than call this proof, it's not a proof, I call it a process of justification for assuming or believing that there is a God. Philosophical arguments for the existence of God. This is what I'm going to do is I'm going to present one philosophical argument. That's the source of knowledge, philosophy. These are not proofs in the strict scientific sense, so don't ask me, oh, you didn't prove God exists. No, you can't. But when you take them all together as a whole, the argument is really convincing. All right. And here's the way these philosophical arguments go. You have a major premise, it's just some general principle, and I use an example. Socrates is a man. That's a pretty general principle. Socrates is a man. Then you have minor premises. These are all information related to our experience. All men are mortal. We know this, okay? And then from all of this, there should be a conclusion that follows logically. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Okay. Buchholz, you see how this works? All right, you're dozing off. Try to stay with me. There's a bunch of philosophical arguments for the existence of God. I'm only going to do the one in red. I guess I should have asked Albritton, which one do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to do the one in red, but when you take all of these together, it becomes a very convincing argument for the existence of God. All right, the Kalman cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause for its beginning. The first premise, whatever begins to exist has a cause. This little thing began to exist at some point, but we know that it had a cause. I mean, some manufacturing process that made this. I don't think anybody would argue with this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Things that begin to exist must have a cause that brought the thing into existence. That's a pretty easy one. All right, the universe began to exist. So already I talked about this last week too. Sorry, I know you're dazed. Theoretical physics, remember I talked about Einstein's field equations, predicted an expanding universe. I've talked about Hubble, his Doppler redshift data, demonstrated an expanding universe. These two converge to an expanding universe. And so you trace it backwards, reverse everything in time. Therefore, the universe must have had a beginning, and this beginning marks the beginning of time and matter. But of course, you didn't hear this last week either. You were in Conway. Y'all never listen at Conway. I know this. So, the Kalman cosmological argument, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause for its beginning. Everybody see how this works? Bruno, you got it? Oh, wait, I'm not the pimp, the faculty. Sorry. All right. Now, I could let it go with that, but that in itself is not very helpful. So let's see what we can figure out about the cause. Nothing existed before the universe came into being. All right? So the universe was brought into existence by something which is greater than the universe and exists beyond the universe because the universe didn't exist. All right. What caused the universe to begin to exist? There's only really two explanations. Oh, smooth. All right. There's only two explanations for causes. One is a scientific. The cause can be explained in terms of natural laws. And the other is a personal explanation, some agent who decides to act freely. Those are the only two ways you can explain causes. Science or a personal agent. Matter and time did not exist before the universe came into existence. If matter and time didn't exist, then you can't describe it by science, so it can't be a scientific explanation for the origin of the universe. So it must be personal. It must be some personal being who freely chose to act, freely chose to bring... Wait, why'd she leave? Oh. No, it'd be like the residents. Just leave it. Just like y'all's resident lounge. Just leave it. Okay. So it must be a personal being who freely chose to act. It can't be some scientific explanation. Okay. The uncaused first cause. Uncaused means it did not begin to exist. It must exist independent of the universe. It must be immaterial, timeless, and transcend space and time. It had to exist before the universe came into existence, so it's immaterial, timeless. So, the uncaused first cause. A personal creator of the universe exists, and this personal creator has the following attributes. Uncaused, no beginning, transcends space and time, incredibly powerful to bring the universe into creation. And this is what, if you ask people, how would you describe God? This would be, well, if you thought about it any. Just leave that. Yeah. Amron will get it cleaned. No, Albritton will get it cleaned up. All right, but this is how you would describe God. I mean, most people would. All right. This is just one argument for the existence of God. The uncaused first cause, a personal being who is powerful and who transcends space and time. That's just one argument. And like I said, there's a whole slew of these kinds of arguments. And when you start putting them all together, they all approach it from a different perspective. But when you start putting them all together, it's a very convincing argument for the existence of God, okay? The knowledge source was philosophy. All right. Theism, worldview, personhood. Oh, we're doing good. All right. Some of this I went through with the residents. So, Reddy, do you remember any of this? Were you even there? Oh, probably not. I was on maternity leave. Okay. How should we think about human persons? What sorts of things are they? What is it to be human? What is it to be a human person? And how should we think of personhood? These are the things that we ought to be asking about personhood. I mean, we should have asked this back when I did last week's lecture. All right? Those are relevant questions to personhood. Plantinga went on to say, on the Christian scheme of things, this is the Christian worldview, God is the premier person, the first and chief exemplar of personhood, and the properties most important for an understanding of our personhood are properties we share with Him. Okay, this is a theistic, in this case, a Christian worldview. God is the clearest and most obvious example of person. The properties we share with God are most important for an understanding of our personhood. And by shared properties, what we're talking about is we become God's image bearers. Properties of God. God is an immaterial spirit, and He possesses a set of ultimate capacities. Thought, belief, sensation, emotion, volition, desire, intentionality, all of these things. But all of these are non-physical properties. God and His ultimate capacities are non-physical. So it makes sense to think of it like this. The fact that God is an immaterial spirit with immaterial capacity is justification for claiming the same thing of human persons, immaterial. The fact that humans live in a physical world is reason enough to accept a person also has a physical component. So when we look at it in a theistic worldview, person exists as God's image bearer, an immaterial spirit with immaterial capacities housed within a physical body. Except for the immaterial spirit, last week we talked about the immaterial capacities. And I talked to you about the problem with the mind and the brain and all that stuff. Okay, so we have an immaterial side. All right. God's image bearers, immaterial capacities, the ability to exhibit consciousness, awareness of self, free will, reason, and we are unlike other creatures. From a theistic worldview, God made us different than my pet dog, Ollie, little Fido. Thank goodness. All right. So what sorts of things are they in the theistic worldview? Things we're talking about. Humans, a personal being with godlike capacities. Humans were created for a specific purpose, unlike evolution. And humans are separate and distinct from non-human animals. So as God's image bearer, man has supreme intrinsic worth, is equal in worth with all other human beings, recognizes objective moral values, finds meaning in life, and is centered in God and not self. Okay, does this make sense with what we generally accept as true? Okay, theism, equal and intrinsic worth. All Britain's worth is the same as my worth. Okay, it's intrinsic and equal. Don't count on it. Human beings are distinct from animals, and there are absolute moral truths. And this theistic worldview is the foundation for science, human rights, charity, and compassion. So does this make sense with what we generally accept as being true? Okay. This is good. I'm at the final comment stage. Anybody have any questions up to now? Albert, you got anything? I noticed you were kind of dazing off. I mean, I saw it. I mean, I was looking directly at you, and you're going. But if you were bright, you would have said I was thinking. All right. J. Gresham Machen. This is a highly conservative theologian. He was back in the early 1900s. And I want to just read what he wrote. The anti-intellectual tendency. Just forget about this having to do anything with Christianity, religion, anything. Forget about that as I read these words and think about it in your own life and how this may have meaning. The anti-intellectual tendency in the modern world is no trifling thing. How do we see an anti-intellectual tendency in the modern world? How? Albritton, I can't keep picking on you. Amrine, this is a fourth-year question. Where's that anti-intellectual tendency? It's not the arguing, oh, we don't want to take these tests or anything. No, where is it? Anybody? Huh? No, it's the tendency, and please, I know I'm older than you all, but I've also got more life experiences. It's the tendency to sit in front of the television. It's the tendency to sit on Facebook. It's the tendency to worry about your text messaging. It's the tendency to be entertained and not read and grow your mind. That's the anti-intellectual tendency that he's talking about. And what is being neglected is the patient attention to facts, which is why you all are taking those tests, okay? Thinking cannot be carried out without the materials of thought, and the materials of thought are facts. And it's really frustrating for me when I get into a discussion about theology with somebody who doesn't have any concept of fact. And I know, Tamara, you feel the same way. We have no concept of facts, the facts that are in the Bible and philosophy and all that. It is impossible to think with an empty mind. I'm lecturing the students. It's impossible to think with an empty mind. It's impossible to have an opinion about something. Hell, if you don't know anything about it. Oh, excuse me. I didn't mean to say it. But it really, truly is. The chief obstacle to the Christian religion today lies in the sphere of the intellect. And I would take Christian religion out of there, and I would say the chief obstacle to medical education lies in the sphere of the intellect. Okay? I mean, I just honestly believe. Oh, good, I can do this because I'm still a chair. But when I was a resident, I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning before I came in the hospital, and I would read, because what I found is that the more I knew about the patients I was taking care of, the easier patient care became. Okay? So take this to heart. Forget that it says anything about Christian religion. Seriously, y'all. Anyhow, Albritton, what's your favorite show on TV? Don't answer it. All right. Okay, so anti-intellectual tendency, and I put this up. This guy named John Hott he's retired now, professor of theology. What he tried to do was force theism into naturalism so that he would achieve some degree of intellectual acceptability amongst the secular world. Evolution is an absolutely essential ingredient in our thinking about God today. Okay? Absolutely essential. So he's trying to make theism conform to naturalism. Naturalism cannot answer questions, the why questions, the important questions in which personhood is embedded. Why does life have meaning? Naturalism can't answer that. Why does free will exist? Why are there moral facts? Why do humans have values? All the way down the list. Naturalism cannot answer that. Matter of fact, how can natural science determine which of the following is true? A human person is a properly functioning physical brain that emerges when a certain level of complexity appears. We talked about that last week. Or a human person is a soul that God imputes at the time of conception. Naturalism cannot make that distinction. So there has to be some other source of knowledge. And that's the argument I'm making, that theism is a very good other source. So we have two distinct worldviews, two distinct views of human worth, and just one of these makes, in my worldview, only one of them makes sense. Okay, Personhood, human worth. That baby shows up. How are we going to look at the fetus? Naturalism. Man assigns the worth to that baby. Theism, God places intrinsic worth within the baby. And this is where the conflict lies, okay? And it's the same at the other extreme. This is not me and my wife. Oh, Lord! But it's also true at the other extreme of life. I mean, this poor lady, clearly Alzheimer's. What's her worth? Well, naturalism, man assigns the worth. Theism, God places it intrinsically. All right? So you need to be thinking about these issues. All right. Now, I have a 6-minute video. And what I wanted, and the guy's name is Daniel Dennett. Danny is an atheist, big proponent of evolution. And here are the things I want you to think about as you hear this video. And I could have picked anything. I could have picked I chose an atheist. Trying to be fair and balanced. All right. The title of the video is How Religion Offers an Excuse to Stop Thinking. Stop thinking is his code word for blind faith. And you'll see in this that public-private split that I was talking about. That's probably my wonderful, unless one of you all texted me and told me to shut up. And you'll see in this 6-minute video that all issues must be discussed in secular terms. Only secular morality is acceptable. And he says this, remove the faith card off the table in order to have a reasonable discussion. Again, faith for him is blind faith, and he gets this all confused. He doesn't get it. And then he uses an extreme religious examples to make his point, and he picks on the Muslims as his example why religion is not good. Blind faith, he says, people who believe in God become morally incapacitated when discussing moral issues. So he throws that in, blind faith. And then because not everyone agrees with him, religious knowledge is not acceptable. So as you hear this, just think about the stuff that we've talked about last week and the stuff that we've talked about this week, okay? Oh, what do I do, Jenny? Okay.
Why is this of such concern to you, Dan? If my faith doesn't pick your pocket or break your bone, as Thomas Jefferson said, why should you share what I believe?
Well, exactly. I wouldn't accept that religious people care so much about what everybody else believes. Why do they care? Why do Christians care what Muslims believe? Why do Muslims care what Christians believe? And to me, the really dangerous thing about religion, and this is not everybody, of course, it's not half, thank goodness, but it's many, and that is, the one thing that I think is really dangerous in many religions is that it gives people a gold-plated excuse to stop thinking. To stop thinking, to say, I don't have to think about that because my religion says this is right, this is wrong, it's as clear as that, it's black and white, I don't have to think about this anymore. It's just a matter of faith. And we honor that.
Hillary Clinton.
We said, oh, it's a matter of faith. I think we have to stop honoring people for stopping thinking. I think we have to say to people, fine, you have your faith, great. Your job then, your duty to your own faith, is to explain to those of us who do not share your faith why you're right about this. Let it be true that God told you. Let it be absolutely true. God told you this is the right way and these ways are wrong. Right. Your problem now is to explain to those of us that God didn't speak to why this is right.
But as that story I told of what happened in the Presbyterian Church in Austin when the Christians denounced the minister for allowing an atheist in the congregation, and the atheist denounced the atheist atheist for surrendering to the superstition of the church. You can't have a real dialogue between people who say, I'm speaking for God, and people who say there is no God to speak.
Well,
Can you?
I don't see why not. It seems to me that those people who have their faith, who believe so strongly in God, if they really believe strongly their God, they believe they're right, they believe that they occupy the moral high ground, they should be only too willing to sit down and put this not to the scientific test, but to the political, moral discussion test of talking about why they believe what they believe. And let's talk about, the main thing we want to talk about is what should we do? What's the moral course of action to take? And if that is to be a reasonable discussion, we have to take a few cards off the table,
Such as?
the faith card. We have to take the faith card off the
What
table.
do you mean take the faith card off the table? I mean, if one is a man of faith, one can't take the gene out.
Well, you know, Lucille says you're wrong. You know who Lucille is? She's a friend of mine. She's always right. I can't play that card in an argument. It's just rude of me to say, you know, Lucille says you're wrong. I say, well, who's Lucille? I say, well, friend of mine, always right. End of the discussion.
But we're confronted today with people who say they know the mind of God.
And I think the way we should deal with it is to say, well, that's very interesting, because now you've got a real problem. Since the rest of us don't know the mind of God, we can't share your direct line, so you're going to have to do the best you can in a secular discussion about what the right thing to do is. Are you up to the task of explaining to the rest of us who don't have your hotline to God why you're right? And don't just tell me that God told you. We know that. We accept that.
Suppose I'm sitting here, I'm a Muslim, and I say to you, look, book 5, verse 44 condemns apostasy and it says the heretic should be put to death. And I'm telling you that this is my holy script, and I believe that is the case. What do you say to me?
I say, well, the fact that it says it in your holy text is an interesting historical fact, but it doesn't settle whether it's right. It just doesn't.
But it settles for me, speaking for the Muslim, that is true.
Well, it is possible, of course, that many people are simply morally incapacitated for engaging in moral deliberation.
How come? You have to do it. Would you have to submit that to a scientific test of observation and verification?
If they can't hold a discussion, a reasonable, respectful political discussion about these issues without simply playing the faith card, then I guess they have to admit that they can't defend what they're saying. I think the big problem that we have is we have been too willing just to let people play the faith card, and it just trumps everything. And it might have been all right, except it's being abused a great deal around the world today. And I think, and besides, nobody believes that. Let's face it. If somebody came up and said, look, my religion says well, I don't have to make up a case. I'm going to take the case of apostasy you just mentioned. There are clerics in Islam right now who say, death for apostasy, that's our religion, and we should do it. And I think everybody in the world should stand up and say, don't be ridiculous. Don't be silly. That is barbaric. It is simply beyond the pale. Doesn't matter what your tradition is. This is not a tradition that should be honored.
And the church once put the Catholic Church once put heretics to
Absolutely right, and they've learned better, haven't they?
They have learned.
And I think we should not be afraid to say to the Muslim world, come on, wake up. We made this mistake in the past too, we Christians, but we're not making it anymore. We Christians, we Jews, that certainly Christians and Jews certainly made that mistake in the past.
Okay. Did you see those themes brought out? I mean, really, what'd you think, Emily? I'm not interested in your worldview, but what did you think of?
Kind of goes in a circle without ever actually getting.
No, I think well, my own personal view of this is this guy is intellectually weak. He does not accept that there is knowledge related to theism, and he just throws everybody into blind faith and paints, in this case, Christianity as blind faith, and that we become morally paralyzed discussing moral issues. And everything should come into a secular worldview. Now, there are things that are certainly secular, okay? I mean, climate change, okay. I'm sure that's entirely secular. Medical education is secular. But there are things where theism can play a role and has an opinion. Abortion, genocide, slavery, euthanasia. These are moral issues that we ought not to leave to the secular world to make decisions on. Okay, but I played this on purpose. This is one of the leading, never mind, I don't want to, it's not important. But this is I don't care what y'all's worldview is, but you need to decide for yourselves how you view these moral issues. One second. I was just talking to myself. He turned around to look. All right, so look. My wife and I, we have friends. They're husband and wife. They're lawyers. And the woman told us, the woman lawyer, said, we love to deal with doctors. And my wife goes, oh, really? Yeah, because they're so involved in taking care of patients that we can put anything over on them that we want. I'm trying to help y'all, okay? Don't go through life like that. Don't go through life blind, leaving decisions up to other people. All right? So anyhow, anybody have any questions? I'm done. Book holds, come on.
I don't have any questions.
Your little liberal worldview, you don't have anything?
I think it's interesting that he sort of tries to cross over. I mean, basically, anybody who argues a place of theism to him is an idiot.
Well, right, but that's what he did. He blinded, blind. People who have blind faith are idiots, frankly.
Right.
I mean, that's my thought.
Well, how can you take religion out of any moral discussion? I mean, aren't things that are moral based on what our religious beliefs are or not?
Well,
Oftentimes.
no, because according to him and a lot of other people, it should be discussed in a political, secular world. And anybody who's got beliefs founded in beliefs founded in theism, those are irrational. So the idea is that morality pertains to the current state of affairs, and it's like this today, but it could change tomorrow. So it allows flexibility in making whatever moral truths you want to make.
It also means that there's no value in human life.
No.
At either extreme. I mean, you have to follow.
There is value, but it's a value placed on it by people like that.
Right. Or by yourself, because it's a selfish worldview,
Oh, yeah.
and I am the most important thing.
Already you hear that?
I am the most important thing.
Two distinct worldviews, two distinct views of human worth, and I just think one makes sense. That's just me. Okay. Anybody have any questions? As always, the residents sit there without questions, but that's okay. All right, we're done. Thank you.